You don't need a perfect summer. You don't need perfect fasting. You don't need perfect food choices, and you don't need perfect consistency. What you need is connection. Welcome back to another episode of the Fasting Method podcast. This is Coach Terri Lance. At TFM, our new program, Summer Steady, is starting this week, and it gave me this perfect inspiration to record this turbo talk for you. And what I want to talk about is something that comes up every single year around this time, and this time being summer. And specifically, how to navigate summer in a way that allows you to enjoy it without feeling like you have to recover from it. Because if you've been working on your health, your fasting practice, your food choices, your weight loss goals, or simply trying to feel better in your body, summer can often feel like a very difficult season. The routines that normally support you start to loosen. You're traveling, family comes to visit, you're attending barbecues, weddings, birthday parties, vacations, reunions, and weekends at the lake. Schedules change, bedtime shift, meals happen at odd times. And suddenly it can feel like you're constantly trying to make decisions in situations that don't fit neatly into your usual routine. What often happens is that people respond in one of two ways. Now, the first is to try to maintain their normal routine perfectly. They tell themselves, I'll just keep doing exactly what I've been doing. But then real life happens. The vacation arrives, the family visit arrives, the beach trip arrives. And when they can't execute their routine perfectly, they feel frustrated, disappointed, or like they're failing. Now, the second response is kind of the opposite. People decide to take the summer off. They tell themselves, I'll start again in September. I'm just going to enjoy myself. I'm not going to think about any of this until summer is over. The problem is that September eventually arrives, and many people find themselves feeling physically worse, emotionally discouraged, and frustrated that they lost momentum that they worked so hard to build. And what I'd like to suggest today is that there is a third option. You can maintain the momentum you have been building, or you can even create the momentum that you've been struggling to establish. You don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to completely disconnect either. There's a middle path, a steadier path, one where you remain connected to your health, your goals, and yourself, even while your routine looks different. Because the truth is that success isn't determined by what you do when conditions are perfect. Success is determined by what you do when life becomes messy. And summer is practice for real life. I often remind people that the goal is not to become someone who can follow a plan under ideal conditions. The goal is to become someone who can stay connected to themselves under a variety of conditions, because life will always contain vacations, holidays, stressful periods, celebrations, unexpected events, visitors, travel. If our health only works when everything is perfectly controlled, then it isn't really integrated into our lives yet. One of the biggest mindset shifts I encourage people to make is this: to stop asking, how do I stay perfectly on plan this summer? And instead to start asking, how do I stay connected to myself this summer? Those are very different questions. The first question tends to create pressure and really stems from the diet mentality. The second question creates awareness and stems from the self-care mentality. So let's talk about what staying connected actually looks like. One important way to maintain connection is learning to think flexibly. Many people unintentionally approach summer with all or nothing thinking. If they can't do their ideal fasting schedule, they do nothing. If they choose to have dessert at a party, they spend the rest of the weekend eating whatever they want. If they go off track for a day, they assume they've ruined everything. But health isn't built through perfection. It's built through reconnection. One meal never creates success, and one meal never creates failure. What matters is your ability to come back. Can you enjoy vacation and reconnect when you return? Can you have a difficult week and reconnect without shame? That skill is far more valuable than following a perfect plan for a few weeks. And this brings me to something I see over and over again, what I call future self bargaining. It's the belief that some future version of us is going to do what we're unwilling to do today. We tell ourselves, I'll start after vacation. I'll get serious once summer is over. I'll wait until the kids go back to school. I'll start fresh in September. And here's what makes this so appealing. It feels responsible. It feels like we're making a plan. But if we're honest, most of us have been making some version of that plan for years. The date changes, the season changes, the circumstances change, but the pattern stays the same. Because the issue was never July, the issue was never December, the issue was never vacation, and it was never the holidays. The issue is that we keep believing our success depends on finding a season of life that doesn't contain challenges. And that season never arrives. Life keeps happening. There will always be travel. There will always be celebrations. There will always be stress. There will always be unexpected disruptions and reasons to wait. If lasting change requires the absence of those things, then lasting change becomes impossible. The people who actually succeed aren't the people who find the perfect season. They're the people who learn how to live their health goals inside imperfect seasons. They stop treating real life as an interruption. They start treating real life as the practice field. That's why I think summer is such an important opportunity. Not because summer is harder, but because summer exposes the exact skills we need for long-term success. Can you stay connected when routines change? Can you make decisions without perfect conditions? Can you enjoy special occasions without turning them into special weeks or special months? Can you reconnect quickly after getting off course? Those are maintenance skills. Those are lifestyle skills. Those are the skills that determine where you'll be 5 years from now. And every summer gives us an opportunity to practice them. So instead of asking, how little can I do until September? What if instead you asked, what kind of person do I want to be this summer? What if September wasn't the beginning of your transformation, but instead, if September simply reflected the transformation you've been practicing all along? I think sometimes we imagine that one day we'll wake up motivated enough to finally become the person we want to be, but that's not usually how it works. We become that person through hundreds of small decisions, today, tomorrow, the next day, not through a revolution, but through an evolution, not through a dramatic restart, through a continued relationship with ourselves, a continued practice of showing up, a continued willingness to reconnect. That's what creates change that lasts. And the beautiful thing is that you don't have to wait for September to begin. The opportunity is here. Today is practice. Tomorrow, this weekend is practice. Your vacation is good practice. Your family barbecue, great practice. Your next restaurant meal is practice, not a test, not a pass or fail moment, but practice. And every time you stay connected, even imperfectly, you're casting another vote for the person you're becoming. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, I understand the mindset, but what does this actually look like when I'm standing at a barbecue or heading off to vacation? So let me share a few practical approaches. The first approach is to identify what I call your baseline habit. This is the habit that helps you stay connected even when life is messy. It's not your ideal routine necessarily, it's your baseline routine. Now, maybe that's maintaining a consistent eating schedule. Maybe it's avoiding grazing. Maybe it's taking a walk every day. Or maybe it's doing 3 fasts per week. The question isn't, what's my best possible plan? The question is, what is the plan that allows me to remain connected to myself? Because maintaining connection, again, matters more than maintaining perfection. This baseline habit really serves as your anchor. So if you think about a boat sitting in a harbor, the boat doesn't stop moving. The water shifts, the wind changes, the tide comes in and out, but the anchor keeps it from drifting away entirely. And your summer baseline habits anchor you in this same way. They keep you from drifting entirely and losing the momentum that you've either already established or are working to build. Second, you want to decide your non-negotiables before summer situations arrive. Now, this is not 20 rules, just 2 or 3. For example, I don't snack between meals, or maybe I stop eating after dinner. I always restart my fasting schedule after I travel. I prioritize protein at meals. The purpose here isn't about rigidity. The purpose is reducing decision fatigue. When you already know what matters most, you don't have to renegotiate with yourself every day. Now, the third approach is to think about if there are foods or experiences you genuinely want to enjoy, choose them intentionally. Notice I didn't say avoid them. I said choose them. There's a huge difference between intentionally deciding to have your grandmother's famous pie at a family gathering and mindlessly eating everything that's available all weekend long. One is a conscious choice. The other is drifting. The goal here isn't perfection. The goal is intentionality. Enjoy what matters, skip what doesn't. One of the things I remind people often is that most summer memories aren't actually about food. They're about people. They're about laughter. They're about being outside. They're about connection. They're about watching your grandchildren play in the yard. They're about sunsets and conversations and adventures. Sometimes we accidentally reduce the entire experience to what's on that plate. What if the food was one part of the experience rather than the main event? What if your goal was to fully experience the gathering rather than fully experience the buffet? That simple shift can be incredibly freeing. And finally, expect imperfect moments. They will happen. The goal isn't to avoid them. The goal is to shorten the recovery time after they happen. Many people spend weeks recovering from one weekend, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. They beat themselves up or they feel guilty. They postpone restarting. They wait for Monday or next month or September. Instead, ask, how quickly can I reconnect? Not perfectly, just quickly. Because people who succeed long-term aren't necessarily better at staying on track. They're better at getting back on track. Another idea that I think is incredibly important is understanding the difference between commitment and intensity. Many people confuse these two. They think that they're committed only when they're operating at 100%, when they're following every guideline, when they're doing longer fasts, when they're meal prepping, when they're exercising regularly, when everything feels structured and focused. But commitment and intensity are not the same thing. Intensity naturally rises and falls throughout life. Sometimes we're able to give more energy to our health goals, and sometimes life requires us to give more attention to other places. Commitment is not about always operating at maximum intensity. It's about staying connected regardless of the level of intensity. Anyone can feel committed when conditions are ideal. The real question is, what does commitment look like while I'm on vacation? What does commitment look like during a week filled with family events or social gatherings? What does commitment look like when you're tired, when you're traveling, or when your routine is disrupted? Maybe commitment during these times means maintaining 1 or 2 anchor or baseline habits instead of 10. Maybe it means fasting a little less aggressively, but still avoiding grazing. Maybe it means choosing awareness instead of being on autopilot, or reconnecting quickly instead of spiraling into shame. That's real commitment. And ironically, it's that kind of flexible commitment that creates lasting consistency, not intensity, consistency. I once had a client who had a huge goal, and he had shared with me that this happened 3 or 4 times over the years. That in about April or May, he and his wife had made a plan. Maybe it was to go on a cruise, or it was going to a family wedding or something. And so he would start doing really intense fasting. And he would fast for 7 days, and then he would eat 1 meal. And then fast for 7 days and eat 1 meal. And he would do this for 4-5 months. And then suddenly it came time to go on the cruise, and he had lost like 130 pounds. But what do you think happened when he got on that cruise? He hadn't learned to be consistent with his eating. He had only learned to do the intense, ultra fast that meant avoiding all eating. So by the time he got off the cruise, he had maybe gained 30 pounds. A few weeks later, another 20 pounds, because he returned to all of those habits of over-consuming or choosing foods that didn't work well for his body. So remember, as flashy and as promising as intensity may sound, consistency is actually what works. And I want to briefly mention something that we're launching at the Fasting Method. I mentioned this earlier at the beginning of this episode, but we have a program called Summer Steady. And the reason we created it is because so many people struggle with exactly what we've been talking about today. Not because they don't know what to do, and not because they lack information, but because real life happens. Summer happens, travel happens, family happens. And staying connected through those seasons requires a different set of skills than simply following a plan when conditions are ideal. So Summer Steady is designed around the idea of active recovery for your health, not pushing at maximum intensity, not abandoning your goals, but staying intentionally engaged through the summer months with practical guidance, support, and community with TFM. If today's conversation resonates with you and you're looking for additional support this summer, we'd love to have you join us. You can find all of the details at the Fasting Method website, and I believe there are still some spots open if you get in right away. As we begin wrapping up, I want to come back to 2 qualities that I think matter more than almost anything else when it comes to lasting change: commitment and compassion. We often hear people talk about commitment, but we don't hear enough about compassion. And compassion is frequently misunderstood. Compassion is not about making excuses. It's not about lowering your standards. It's not pretending something didn't happen. Compassion is not letting yourself off the hook. Compassion is refusing to abandon yourself when things don't go perfectly. It's being honest about what happened, learning from it, adjusting, and reconnecting, without turning a difficult moment into a personal indictment, without deciding you failed, without waiting until Monday or next month or September. Commitment keeps you moving forward. Compassion keeps you from giving up. And together they create the kind of consistency that lasts far beyond summer. So as you move through the coming weeks, I hope you'll remember this. You don't need a perfect summer. You don't need perfect fasting. You don't need perfect food choices, and you don't need perfect consistency. What you need is connection. connection to your goals, connection to your intentions, connections to your future self, and connections to the person you're becoming, because progress isn't built by never drifting. Progress is built by learning how to return again and again, today, tomorrow, and the day after that. Have a wonderful week, everyone, and I look forward to bringing another episode to you next week.